Welcome to the scorekeeper section of the high jump tutorial. In this section, you will learn all of the responsibilities that the scorekeeper has in regards to officiating the event. You'll also see some nuances or some special scenarios at the very end that you may encounter during a competition. All right, let's jump right into it. So here you can see this is the score sheet that you'll get when you first enter into the venue and you get it on your clipboard. So you'll have on the left-hand side here, the jumpers, however many you have entered into the competition, followed by their club affiliation, their bib number, and whatever seed height that they were entered into the competition with. Usually the seed height is their PR, and that's not always the case. You can see for jumper A, it says NH, so that's no height. So that jumper was not entered into the competition with a seed height. So maybe it's their first competition ever, or their coach just didn't enter them with a seed height. The jumpers are always listed in order from the lowest seed height to the highest seed height. So you can see down here at number 6, jumper F has a seed height of 1.66 meters. They will always be run in that order, with the best jumper, if you will, being the last jumper entered into the competition. Once we get to the venue and we see that we have our score sheet and we're beginning the event, participants are coming up, they're getting their marks. Of course, we need to check them in. So when we check them in, we will ask them to come over and tell us their opening height. So in youth competition, they determine what their opening height is. Now the opening height always has to be either on the half or the whole. Everything is done in metric, and so it either needs to be on the half or the whole. So for example, we can see here that this jumper, jumper A, wants their opening height to be 1.30 meters. They cannot pick 1.32 meters or 1.37 meters. It would have to be 1.30 or 1.35 or 1.25 or 1.40. Anything within that realm is fine. They could even pick 0.80 if they wanted to. Or they could pick 2.05. Any height is acceptable, but you have to make sure that the athlete tells you the height that they are wanting to come into the competition as. And if there's a scenario where the coach is doing all of the talking for the athlete, usually you'll see that especially with the younger kids and sometimes with the older kids, the coach will be the one to tell you, oh, yep, they're coming in at this height or that. Make sure that you have the athlete tell you. So make sure that if the coach says they want to come in at 155, you tell the coach to tell the athlete and have the athlete come and tell you. So that way there's no confusion. The athlete has clearly communicated with you as the official as to their opening height. Once you have determined their opening heights, you should write it down on your clipboard so that way you can then produce your score sheet, right? So then you can then fill in your score sheet. So here we have jumper A's coming in at 130 as well as jumper B, jumper C 140 as well as jumper D, and jumper E and F are both coming in at 155. So now that we know our opening heights, we can fill in our score sheet. So the first height of the competition will be 130, you can see here, followed by 135 because everything is moved up in 5-centimeter progressions. So in the high jump, all marks are moved up by 5-centimeter progressions. The next height will be 140, 145, and so on. As we look at our score sheet, we can see the jumper F, again, has a seed height or potentially a personal best of 1.66 meters. So I like to score it out at least to 1.70 meters because they may have a PR that day, they may have a fantastic competition or not, but at least I have it ready at 1.70 meters. And if they go above that, perfect. I have some space here so I can fill in 1.75 or 1.80, whatever's necessary moving forward. Once we've filled out the top row of our score sheet, we can then determine who is coming in at what height. So you see jumper C here is coming in at 1.40 meters. So we'll just draw a line through 1.30 and 1.35, showing to us that we don't start entering them into the competition until 1.40. The same for jumper D, and jumper E and F coming in at 1.55 will be the same setup. You'll notice up here that I have an asterisk. That is because any jumper that is coming in greater than 1.45 meters for this competition, meaning that the first three heights of the competition they are passing will be given an opportunity for a run through without the bar at the height that they're going to enter the competition. So I always like to make sure that I put an asterisk up at that fourth height of the competition so that I know anyone that's coming in at that height or greater will be given an opportunity for a run through without the bar once their actual height that they're coming into the competition comes into play. So for example, here we can see jumper C and D are coming in at 1.40, so they would not qualify for that run through without the bar. However, jumper E and F, they're coming in at 1.55. So when they come in at 1.55 and the bar is moved to that level, they will be given an opportunity for a run through without the bar before they actually begin their jump. And so I know because it's greater than 1.45. If they were coming in at 1.45, it would be the same. If they were coming in 1.50, it would be the same. But here in our competition example, they're coming in at 1.55. So once we move the bar up to 1.55, they'll be asked, jumper E, would you like a run through? They say yes or no. If they say yes, then we'll remove the bar. Jumper E will get his run through, and then we'll put the bar back up, and then the competition will begin. All right, so how do we mark? So marking is always done by X's, O's, and dashed lines. So you can see over here that an X is a miss, an O is a make, and a dashed line is a pass. So the competition has begun in our scenario here. So let's see, how do we score this out? Or not scored it, but how do we begin the marking? So jumper A was the first jumper up. We said, jumper A, you are up, jumper B on deck, because those are the only two jumpers that were coming in at 1.30 meters. So jumper A missed on his first attempt, so we mark it with an X. Jumper B made it on his first attempt, so we mark it with an O. So now jumper A has a second attempt, and on his second attempt, he made the height, 1.30 meters. So now all the individuals who would have been jumping at 1.30 meters have made the attempts. So we now raise the bar up to 1.35 meters. So at 1.35 meters, once again, we say, jumper A, you are up, jumper B on deck. At 1.35 meters, jumper A jumps and he makes it. So he gets an O. And jumper B jumps and he makes it. So he also gets an O. So once again, all of the jumpers entered at 1.35 meters have made it. So we move the bar up to 1.40 meters. Now at 1.40 meters, jumper A has decided to pass. Now it's important to understand two things in relation to passing. Number one, jumpers will pass the entire height, not attempts. So even though they get 3 attempts at each height, if they determine that they want to pass, they're passing the entire height. So jumper A will not take any attempts at 1.40 meters and instead would resume the competition at 1.45 meters. An important note here is even though they passed at 1.40 and their next height would be 1.45, remember I told you about the asterisks, they do not get an opportunity for a run through because they already entered the competition previously. If they had not entered the competition previously, then they would have been given an opportunity for a run through at 1.45. That's just an important nuance to understand. But getting back here to 1.40, because jumper A has chosen to pass 1.40, you can see that we put a dashed line in each of the boxes. So that way we know that jumper has chosen to pass that entire height. You could also just put a dashed line straight through and it would be the same. Now, jumper B would be the first jumper up, jumper C and jumper D would follow. So the way that we would call them at this point is jumper B, you are up, jumper C on deck, jumper D on hold. So jumper B would be the first jumper that would enter into the competition. The second aspect of passing that I mentioned earlier, as important to understand, is the jumper has to tell you as the official that they are passing the height before you call them up and the time starts. Once the time starts and you call them up, they have to make an attempt at that height or it will be rendered a miss because it's already begun. So if the jumper knows that they're not going to jump at the height, especially while you're moving it up, or once you have everything measured, they need to make sure they come and tell you, or even before you move it up, they need to tell you, listen, I'm going to pass at 1.40 meters. Okay, excellent. But if they wait, you've moved the height up to 1.40 meters, you say jumper A, you're up, jumper B on deck, jumper C on hold, the time has started, and now jumper A wants to come and tell you, oh, I'm going to pass this height. Well, at that point, it's too late. At that point, it's too late. And they have to actually enter into the competition and make an attempt at that height, or it'll be rendered a miss. So that's important to understand there. So let's continue on with our scoring. So now we've done a full competition here, okay? We've done a full competition. As you can see, we have X for misses, O's for makes, dashed lines for passes. Once a competitor misses 3 consecutive attempts, you can see here jumper A has missed 3 consecutive attempts at 1.60 meters, then they're out of the competition. And we place their best mark is the height that they last made. So for jumper A, the height that jumper A made was 1.55 meters. So that becomes their best mark of the competition. You can see here for jumper B, that jumper B made 1.60 meters and they went out at 1.65 meters. So their best mark is 1.60 meters. We go down to jumper C, theirs is 1.55 meters. Jumper D, 1.60, and jumper E and jumper F both at 1.65 meters. So once a jumper has been eliminated from the competition, I generally draw a line all the way through so that I know I don't need to call that jumper again. Now, how do we score? Since the competition is over, how do we score? So you can see over here, this is direct from the USATF 2020 competition rulebook. It says if 2 or more competitors have the same best heights, the procedure to decide places is as follows. A, the competitor with the lowest number of jumps at the height, which was their best height in the competition, shall be awarded the higher place. B, if applying A will not decide, the competitor with the lowest total of failures throughout the competition up to and including the height last cleared shall be awarded the higher place. And C, if applying B will not decide, the competitors involved shall be awarded the same place unless it concerns first place. So let's look at our competition. If we check our best marks here, we see that jumper E and jumper F both have 165. So now we have to determine, is there a tie or who is in first? Excuse me. So let's apply A. The competitor with the lowest number of jumps at the height, which was their best height in the competition, shall be awarded the higher place. So if we look at jumper E made 1.65 on their first attempt, and jumper F also made 1.65 on their first attempt. So they both have only one attempt at 1.65, so we can decide based on rule A. So let's look down at rule B. If applying A will not decide, the competitor with the lowest total of failures throughout the competition up to and including the height last cleared shall be awarded the higher place. So if we look at jumper E, we can see that jumper E missed at 1.60 meters one time. And if we look at jumper F, we see that jumper F did not miss at all throughout the competition until, of course, 1.70. So that means that jumper F in our scenario will be awarded first place, and jumper E will be awarded second place. So let's move on. The next best marks are 1.60 meters. We have 2 competitors that jumped 1.60 meters. So let's go over here to jumper B. And again, we apply scenario A, or I should say rule A. 1.60 meters, we see that they made it on their first attempt. Let's go down to jumper D, who also made it on his first attempt at 1.60 meters. Now we have to apply B, rule B, which is what? the lowest total of failures throughout the competition up to and including the height last cleared. So if we look at jumper B, we see that jumper B has 0 misses. They did not miss throughout the competition. So now let's look at jumper D. Jumper D also has 0 misses. So we're still tied. So let's look at rule number C, or rule C, I should say. If applying B will not decide, the competitors involved shall be awarded the same place unless it concerns first place. So in this scenario, we know that it does not concern first place. So that means both of these competitors will be awarded third place. So they tied for third. So let's move on to our last series here, where we have jumper A, whose best mark is 1.55, and jumper C, whose best mark is also 1.55. Again, we look at the height that they last cleared, which is 1.55, and we see that jumper A made it on their first attempt, whereas jumper C missed on their first attempt and made it on their second attempt. So here, the competitor with the lowest number of jumps at the height, which was their best height in the competition, shall be awarded the higher place. So in this scenario, it is jumper A. Now, jumper A is not awarded fourth place. Jumper A is not awarded fourth place. Jumper A is actually awarded fifth place because we had a tie at third place. And jumper C is then awarded sixth place. So once again, just to recap, we have jumper F as the first place jumper based on total number of misses throughout the competition up to and including the height that they made their best height in the competition. And so as we broke that tie between jumper E and jumper F, we noticed that jumper E missed one time during the competition, so they were awarded second place, whereas jumper F was awarded first place. Jumper D and jumper B, they tied for third because at 1.60 meters, they both made it on their first attempt, and they did not have any misses throughout the competition. Now, for jumper A and for jumper C, jumper A was awarded fifth place because, again, there's no fourth place because of that third place tie, because they made 1.55 on their first attempt, whereas jumper C missed 1.55 on their first attempt. So this competition would be done. You've written out their best marks. You've written out their places. Now you can turn this score sheet into the scorers table, and those jumpers that competed can, get their awards, and that competition is over.